you're looking at this from a local level of a specific borough in London. And when people talk about the EU and youth and employment policy, what do you think of? What do you want?
Money, which is that the situation in the UK comes under a regime of austerity, which means that grants to local councils are being absolutely slashed, right, Anna? And we are constantly struggling to keep up our frontline services. We've had X number of years of quote-unquote efficiency savings, but really with the continuation of the austerity agenda, it's going to be very, very difficult not to start whacking our actual services. And I'm a very practical guy. I see the EU as a source of funding, but of course a very difficult one.
Hoy la Unión Europea decide todo el dinero que se gasta, o por lo menos lo controla desde todas las administraciones, por lo menos en los países que están haciendo consolidación fiscal, desde los ayuntamientos hasta el Estado.
One point I'd like to bring out, in the context of austerity, and this is an advantage or an opportunity for the Commission, is because on one hand, the kinds of funds that are being spent might seem limited, but when you look at European funding, in many administrations, a large part of their optional funding, discretionary funding, a lot of it comes from EU funds because their existing budgets are so locked up. So there's a potential for these funds to have quite a bit of impact locally if they're well targeted, because they're, as I say, they're very influential on the discretionary spending.
Myself, I'm Councillor Richard Spate. I'm the lead member for Regeneration in Thurrock. One of the recommendations talks about the extra impact that funding at the local level will have because of its large component, being a large component of the discretionary spend of a local authority. Speaking as a local councillor who's looking at the likely grants coming down government from the line, it's highly possible that may be our only discretionary funding in the very near future, grants like that. So that influence, the influence that European money can have on that kind of approach is only going to grow as we retreat back to statutory provision only.
I mean, not everything is expensive in terms of public expenditure. I think part of the partnerships are really also show that you're speaking, for example, about local business involvement. We currently run a project in Aviles. I think Aviles is also here as part of the 18 pilot projects that we have directly financed under the Youth Guarantee, and they really brought together a broad network of local partners and businesses. And I think I spoke to the project beneficiary saying that the funding wasn't the main driving for the businesses being brought into this network. So
se pueden hacer muchas cosas baratas, como facilitar la creación de empresas, que es prácticamente entre barato y gratis.
To say that it's not expensive, that may be true for the streamlined processes. You have, I mean, everybody in this room knows that the unemployed is not an amorphous mass. There's many different threads and strands. And you have certain people who are barely out of the labor market, and they can come back into the labor market very quickly. And it suffices to put in a fairly, as they say, streamlined process, and that tends to work. And in the UK, that'll be done through JCP, and that's a piece of cake. And you're right, it's not very expensive. Unfortunately, that's not our problem. Because by definition, that's not our problem. Our problem are what we call in the UK the hard to employ. There's many other vocabularies. Now, the hard to employ, getting them back into the labor market is very labor intensive in terms of the employability professionals, brokers, advisors that are required. And labor intensive means that we need warm bodies. And warm bodies, they have a right to have wages. And that is expensive, and that is expensive, and that's one of the reasons which, when you ask me how I see the EU as a source of funding. It is specifically for the more difficult programs, which the councils have to pick up the pieces on. It's not the JCP who's going to do that, it's us at the council level, because we'll suffer with the hard to employ.
In the OECD, we are looking at different kind of initiatives that support young people into the jobs, in the States and Canada and Europe, elsewhere. And I just want to confirm that it is expensive. It is very resource intensive in terms of man-hour and money. But it is the only way to get them in the jobs. So, I mean, it is worth it to spend the money on that particular group and be very supportive.
Money, yeah, money is necessary, but you yourself are the best example for that money is not the most important thing, because in relation to many other investments, the support, the funding for URBACT is a small figure and has a high impact. I want to make my compliments. Yeah, not everything which is good and which is successful, like you, is very expensive. No, yeah? In comparison to the main programs, this is a rather cheap element of it. Yeah, I don't want to minimize it, but I want to say the contrary. For small money, relatively small money, you get a lot, like networking, cooperation, exchange of experiences, exchange of best practices, collaboration, cooperation, enhancing one and each other by experiences which you have made yourself. So you are the proof that it is not really all and necessarily money. And the second reason why I say this is that you will not believe it, that there are a number of member states which underuse the funds which we are providing for them. So it's obviously not only money. It's the question of good projects, because we do not want to fund anything which comes in. No, we want to select the good ones which are creating jobs, which have a long-term impact and not only result in the way that we say, yeah, we were successful to spend the money. We want to get off a spending culture and move to an impact culture. And this needs that we are very selective in projects. And underuse of funds also indicates incapacity of administrations. Not only because they can't read our legislations, they should be able to read the legislation, but it is the inability to submit good projects. And I want to make use of this moment to encourage anybody, everybody, also in the UK, to submit good projects. They have a chance to get funding. You can't say that Romania cannot invent good projects. They have just used 50% of their funds, which means 50% are not used. Yeah? This is the reality, ladies and gentlemen.
Obviously, a good project is better than a project which isn't good. How am I going to disagree with that? But it's one thing to have URBACT, where professionals of employability are speaking to other professionals of employability. We are very outcome-oriented. And for us, our real customers are not fellow employability professionals, it's Enfield's unemployed. It's all the people we're talking to today, it's the coal face. And the coal face are dealt with by jobs brokers who are spending a lot of time with the hard-to-employ cases. And those job brokers need wages. And my friends from the UK over there, who I don't know very well, but I know they're from the UK, they're nodding along with me also. Because we can put, you can sit there and say, I can't speak for the underspend in Romania. The reality is that it is more difficult to cater to the needs of the hard-to-employ without money than it is with money, and just because it doesn't cost that much for URBACT professionals, speak to other URBACT professionals, that's kind of not really relevant. Sorry.
Thank you.